Hey everyone, welcome to EverydayFI, the show that explores the lives and stories of everyday people in the financial independence community. In today's episode, I get to chat with Julie, who shares her journey from a conventional lifestyle to a full-time nomadic traveling one. We talk about her dissatisfaction with day-to-day life that prompted her to sell all her possessions and travel the world with only a $500,000 net worth. We also get to discuss the societal norms around money, her family's financial background, and how she learned to prioritize spending money on meaningful experiences rather than material possessions. Tune in to hear part 1 of our conversation after we hear from our sponsors. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the EverydayFI podcast. Thank you so much for being here and listening in. Today, I'm chatting with my friend Julie, who is a full-time traveler, which is super cool. We love to hear from people like that. Hey, Julie, how are you doing? Why don't you introduce yourself in your own words?
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Julie Rose. Happy to be here. I am a full-time nomad. I'm originally from Minnesota. I last lived full-time in Arizona. And for the past 4 years, have been living part-time in Mexico and part-time traveling the world 100% of the time. I am 39, unmarried, no kids, and 3 years semi-retired. So while I'm just past 4+ years a nomadic, I'm 3 years semi-retired from the day that I quit my job and basically denounced those golden handcuffs.
Yeah, that's amazing. And we're all jealous of you. So, what made you know that you were able to take that leap and, cut those golden handcuffs and become semi retired?
Well, I think about my journey in terms of those two milestones. First, it was deciding to go nomadic, sell the house, sell all the things, and drive off into the sunset. And people asked me what was the impetus for that. And really, it was less of what do I want to do and more of what do I not want to do. And I came to the realization like, hey, I was living the same day over and over, working from home or going to work, maybe going to the gym, coming home, sitting on a couch, having a bottle of wine, watching Netflix, or going out on one bad date after another and just thinking that I'm not my best self right now. My best self is when I'm out there in the world being curious, exploring, appreciating, learning, and really expanding my worldview. And I only really got that when I was traveling. But, the pandemic changed things. You had to sit at home, you had to be depressed and be alone. And I was like, well, if I have to make a choice between one or the other, traveling more while still paying for everything, or giving something up, what am I going to give up? And it made more sense instead of giving up the traveling that I wanted to do, it made more sense to give up the house and the security and the roots that I had planted. So that I feel like that was a really, one of my major milestones. And again, it was more about what I didn't want in my life versus what I did. And just sort of asking myself, hey, I think this is what I want. But the only way to know for sure is trying it out. And everything in life pretty much is reversible. So let's just see, let's just give it a go. And that kind of leads us into the next milestone because I spent about, I think, maybe 15 months still working a full time corporate job while I was, you know, driving all around the US and a little bit of Canada. And I found myself in these amazing places and really wanting to explore, but basically stuck to my desk and looking out the window wistfully, but oh, there's a call coming in, or there's a meeting that I have, or somebody's having some sort of emergency, they need to talk to me. And it really, really came to a head where I think I was in maybe like upstate New York, like the Finger Lakes area. And every single day, every single weekday, it was beautiful. And then the weekend came and it rained like 48 hours straight. And so when that happened, I was like, I am doing this all wrong. And of course, I had been budgeting, I had been saving, I had gone through my own little financial journey up until then. And I kind of just thought, maybe it's now or never but it's never, never. It's always later, right? It's now or later, but later just keeps coming. So I had kind of hit a personal milestone of 500K net worth. And I thought, I think it might be now. And I tendered my resignation and then decided I was free and I would next go down to Mexico. And I've now been on that stint for a little over 3 years.
Yeah, that's incredible. And it's incredible how, some people would think of 500K and be like, oh, that's not enough. But you are demonstrating that it absolutely is enough, especially if you have the courage to sell it all and go nomadic. It's such a, everybody says that travel is so expensive, but when you really hack it and figure it out like you have, it's actually probably cheaper, I bet, than owning a house, for example, or a car or whatever. And yeah, bravo. So, what kind of job did you have, and how often were you traveling while you were working that full time job? I know you said like for 15 months you were kind of doing that, but was that typical, or were you kind of nomadic while you were working, or how does that look?
Yeah, so my career, it started in journalism, like television news, and then I went into marketing and started really specializing in social media. The last job that I had was for a national hospital system. And so we had hospitals all over the US, and I was in charge really kind of building their social media program from the ground up and training all of our individual specialists on it, and then keeping accountable to our metrics and reporting on the results at the end. And so I had all these people in different areas of the US. And, luckily my employers were like, hey, since you pretty much have a presence anywhere, you can be wherever you want. And I was in Arizona. And during the times that I had the house, it was, oh, go to California for work, go to Nevada for work, go to Texas, oh, go to New York for that conference or whatever. So I was traveling quite a bit on business. And then, of course, the pandemic happened. Everything was halted. And I went from, I don't know, maybe it was like 25% travel to nothing. And back when it was 25% work travel, I had also kept on adding on, like I went to Seattle for a meeting, but then I went up to Alaska for 2 weeks and just did some work remote and exploring around Alaska. And we had a really nice vacation policy. So I would always kind of add on and just take PTO, different kind of ways that I maximized what I was doing. So it really was flexible. It really was great. And then when I decided to sell my house, they were like, "Yeah, that's cool, do your thing. Just check in and be available and get your work done." And so I was traveling around, and that was 2020, so full-time nomadic and traveling around the US, but they had sort of said, "Oh, you can't really be outside the US. You have to maintain, like the same thing that everyone's dealing with now with certain payroll laws and stuff." And they didn't really want me to be out of the country. So I figured, I'm like, well, okay, I can't just do the US forever. I've kind of been there, done that. And that was one of the reasons also that, like, I want to move on because, like you said, it is so much cheaper to be outside of the States. And I mean, I probably spend half, actually, I have done the math. I spend at least half as much traveling full time than when I had a full house and suite of bills and regular life, even when I was budget conscious. My money definitely goes farther and lasts for longer.
Yeah, for sure. And we kind of saw that a little bit in the episode with Christina, which was, I believe, episodes 12 and 13, where she is also a full time nomadic. And she has this thing where she posts her monthly budgets. And I love that because it's, oh, yeah, I only spent $1,300 this month or $2,000 this month. And I'm like, what? My budget's $8,000. Oh my gosh. So it makes me curious, what was the first travel experience that you had that gave you that I need to travel a lot more bug? I guess I'm asking it in a way where I don't want to necessarily know your first travel experience ever, but I want to know the one that basically addicted you to travel.
Yeah, I can definitely answer that. I mean, there have been trips and things on and off over the years because, the thing when you're younger, budget is a major concern when you're not making enough money. And also, you don't have any PTO because you're at the beginning of your career. So I only really did a few international trips in my 20s. But the real kicker, the real thing that sort of launched all of this was back in 2017. And that I've talked about this ad nauseum on my blog. But what had happened is, like most people do, you find a job, it becomes a part of your identity. You are so invested and entangled in it and work far more than the 40 hours and you have all this responsibility and all these expectations, and it really sucks you in. And then all of a sudden, you get laid off. So I had one of those jobs. I loved it. It was really high pressure, really high visibility. I learned so much, but I probably cried every couple weeks. And then I got laid off really unceremoniously. It was like a wave of layoffs where hundreds of other people got laid off. We were brought into this conference room and then escorted out like a bunch of criminals to our cars afterward, as if we were going to burn the place down or something. And then when that happened, it was like my days were finally emptied. And I'm like, who am I? What do I do with myself? It was like a big slap in the face. I have let myself be just absorbed by my company and by my position. And, it was great. I had a pretty nice severance in terms of how long I had worked there. So I was like, might as well take that paid vacation because the vacation you never got to take when you didn't have the money and you didn't have the time. So against probably all the better financial advice out there, I was running low on lots of my accounts, but I still thought, hey, I'm going to go for 4 weeks backpacking in Europe. I just planned this, one way ticket taking me to Madrid. I booked a one way out of Germany, which ended up changing that actually because things went in all different directions. But it was one of the most momentous and unforgettable 4 weeks of my life. I lived out of a backpack. I was just carry on only. I did my own laundry. Sometimes I was staying in hostels. Sometimes I was couch surfing. Sometimes I was even like, I'm going to have a hotel because I need to do my laundry in a sink and not gross everybody out. And then, different excursions that I wanted to do. So I was a little bit trying to pay attention to budget, but not so much. So that trip really taught me how to budget. But it also really taught me that I had been living this materialistic commercialist life and that I needed far less that I thought I did to be fulfilled and invigorated and energized the way that I hadn't in so many years before. That I'm like, I need more of this. I want more of this. This was so amazing. And I got back from that trip having pretty much drained all my accounts and needing a job and, kind of freaking out. And it was then that I sort of vowed I need to never be in a place of financial insecurity again. And I never want to be in a place where I have really been swallowed up by my employer. And I need to find hobbies and interests and a personality outside of how I'm defined by my job. And so that really kicked off a whole new way of thinking for me. I launched my blog shortly after that. A lot of other things happened, but that was the impetus to getting my finances under control and deciding I was going to change my life. And let's see, 4 years, 4.5 years later, I quit my job.
Okay, so you got laid off and took that trip 4 years ago, you're saying?
That was 2017.
Got it.
And then when I came back, I ended up being unemployed for 5 months, just a week under 5 months. I got the job that I had 3 years ago. And when I got that job, I was like, all right, we're going to do this differently than before when I was like, I got money now. I can spend this and I can get that paid for and I can do, I changed everything. And it was sort of that discipline that enabled me to 3.5, 4 years ago now, to quit my job.
What were some of the changes you made? Like what you don't have to say all of them, but what were some of the big ones?
Yeah, the major one was I refinanced my house. So it probably goes against popular convention, but I had a 15-year mortgage and I thought I'm going to refinance into a 30-year. So with that extra 400 or so, I put that into my 401k and also the Roth IRA and these other accounts. So I started building those up. Actually rented out my house during the Arizona tourist season. So I used to live in Arizona then. And the winters are high traffic for vacationers. I ended up moving into somebody's tiny backyard casita, which was, I don't know, 400 square feet. So I lived in that. And while I was renting out my house as a vacation home, that allowed me to really save up a ton of money. I decreased all my spending, so I cut subscriptions, I stopped shopping, I consigned some of my belongings that I hadn't used or like remnants of old boyfriends and things like that. I really tried to live beneath my means and I took that to heart. And then I also started side hustling a little bit beyond renting out my house. I bartended during the Phoenix Open, and it was backbreaking 4 days of slinging drinks, but you made tons of tips. So here I am, a mid-30-year-old with all these 20-year-olds, and I'm like, "Hey, I have no shame, whatever it takes to sort of get me ahead, I'm gonna go ahead and take the hit, take the sacrifice because it'll pay off later."
Yeah, and those are all very actionable things that people in the audience could probably do one, if not multiple of those. So thank you for that. When you decided to make these changes, did you have the end goal of I want to quit in 3.5 years? Or was there a goal to all of this? Or was it just I need to change the way I'm doing things?
Yeah, that's a good question. I did not have any real vision. I just knew that the way that I felt when I had been laid off, when I wasn't sure after my severance ran out, where my money was coming from, unemployment was nothing. I basically looked at my closet and I was like, what, is the what the moment? Like, how many thousands of dollars of clothing and accessories are in here? And I'm here not even sure if I'm going to be able to pay my mortgage next month. That is a disconnect. That is not okay. And I just basically told myself, whatever it takes, I'm not going to be there again. I'm going to be in a place that if somebody lays me off, I'm like, cool, now I got a little time to figure out what I'm going to do. I can go to Europe for 2 months, or I can go wherever for 2 months, open-ended, like, it's gonna be I wanted to have a little more well-being and peace of mind around that. So I didn't really know what it was gonna take. I was actually probably really surprised that I saw the accumulation and the snowball effect of compounding, like, one of the wonders of the world, I think they say, and it really gives you such motivation to kind of see those numbers climb the way it did, and so I just kinda got addicted to it. We're like, "Let me make even more little cuts." I started, like, waxing myself and just, you know, doing what some people would call crazy just to keep saving. And I reached that 500K and I thought, "Hey, okay, I'm here earlier than I thought." But I gotta take that leap now because I could just keep on saying 1 more year, 1 more 100K, and then end up like all those people that just die sitting on a pile of money. And what's the point of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I the reason why I asked that question is because I feel like you and I are very similar. Like I'm seeing a lot of similarities in our story because I got laid off in May 2023 and I didn't go and take a vacation. I actually went the opposite way and was so stressed out about getting a job that I got hired in less than 2 weeks after that. But what I did do is during that time, even though I got hired at a new job, I realized when I was in it, I think I took this job too soon because I'm so burnt out. And I actually quit that job early, like 3 months in, and said, I'm going to take a break. And so I took a month break. And that's when I started not EverydayFI, but I started a different company that I then renamed to EverydayFI. I didn't start accumulating money to travel, but it is that jumping off point of I got laid off. And so I was like, I don't want to be beholden to people anymore. And so I need to make moves to create something for myself and also really think about whether or not the way that I'm spending and living is worth it when a company could just cut me any day. And the reason why I asked you if there was a goal is because I made these changes, but there's no, I'm going to quit in 5 years. I don't really have that. I just know that I am wanting to amass more. And then when it feels right, I will do it. Because
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I'm not a huge fan of goal setting. I prefer to do something and I forget who wrote about this, but there's this concept of mastery versus goal setting. And so it's like becoming the type of person who does X rather than
Mm.
goal setting. And I don't remember if it's James Clear who said it in his book or if it was somebody else. And that just resonated with me more than like setting a specific goal because I always felt like setting the goal, if I didn't make it, then it felt like a failure versus becoming that person who does that, then you just are that person forever. Like you are that person who knows how to accumulate wealth and who knows how to live on less and you never have like a goal, you just are that person.
I totally get that, and congratulations on that mindset shift too with your layoff. I think too many people think they need to have it all figured out or they need to have like, where are you going to be in 5 years? And that's almost, I mean, I won't really go this far to say, but maybe I will just for the sake of brevity. It's setting yourself up for failure because what if your vision doesn't come true? What if it doesn't play out the way you want it to play out? Instead, act intentionally. Instead of aiming for maybe to your words, setting goals, but act intentionally, make decisions in line with who you want to be and what values you have. And then along the way, life will just unfold the way it's meant to unfold. You don't need to be somewhere in 5 years or somewhere in 10 years. I mean, sure, you can say, I would like to do this someday, but if it doesn't come true or play out the way you want, some people are so devastated by that it really sets them back in every other way. And we don't need that. Life is hard enough.
It really is. And I just want to give the audience an example too, just so that if this isn't quite clicking, I want to make sure that they're like, oh, that makes sense. So, one thing that I believe, and I do think this is James Clear who said this on one of the many podcasts I've listened to, where he said something about running. So you can either set a goal to run a marathon or a half marathon, or you can just be the type of person who runs every day or runs, twice a week or whatever. Because that person who is the runner will eventually get to a point where they're going to run a half marathon, right? Because
Yeah.
that's just going to be a part of their life. Versus if you get to the point where you run the half marathon, first of all, what happens if you don't do it? You feel like failure. And then what happens if you do it? Then what's next? Are you just going to keep like moving a goalpost and then you always feel like you're not becoming enough because you're not meeting all of your goals that you set for yourself rather than just being a runner. And he was like, because when it comes to something like running that's really difficult, if you don't enjoy doing it, then you're not going to want to do it. And so if you become the kind of person who's a runner because you enjoy running, that's different than I need to run this marathon because of this, that, or the other reason. So,
Yeah.
and I am not a runner, but I connected to that because I was like, okay, I want to be the kind of person who.
Did he write Atomic Habits? Is that the guy? Okay,
Yes.
then yes. Yes, I just read that one too. Speaking of running analogies, I think when it comes like it's a great analogy for trying to save money or manage your finances. People start with this like, "Oh my gosh, I have to run a half marathon like 13.1 miles or I have to save 500K or whatever it is." If you think about it instead with, I just have to run 1 mile 13 times, it's a lot more achievable than a half marathon. And the same thing with, I want to save $5,000 or I want to save $10,000. Try to get to that first 10 and then just say, okay, 1/10 there, and then go on to the next. And I used to run half marathons actually. And so that's how I thought about it. And actually, runners give this advice is focus on that 1 mile and be like, okay, I'm 1/13th, I'm 2/13ths, I'm 3/13ths. And instead of, you're 13, you got a whole 13 miles to go because that sounds really, really scary and overwhelming.
Yeah. And I also think if you don't do it the first time, it's okay to try again, And the reason why I say that is because I thought I was going to be at a savings rate and goal by the point of my life I am at right now that I'm not. And it's because of things that, you know, decisions I made that I don't regret making, but I can't sit there and say I'm a failure because the decisions I made were in line with my values. And so just
Yeah.
because I don't have the amount of money that I had planned to have by the time I was 37 does not mean I'm a failure because I lived my life to, according to what I valued. And so if you value enjoying running or enjoying saving or enjoying your life or whatever, it's okay if running a half marathon or a marathon needs to happen next year,
Hmm.
because you know that you're like, you know what, this isn't enjoyable anymore right now. I'm on mile 10 and, I can tell that if I keep going, I'm probably going to hurt myself. And, I'm really good with how far I came. So I'm fine. Let's just
Yeah.
do this again next year. Like that's the mindset that really is where we should all be striving to get to rather than beating ourselves up for not getting those last 3 miles, which I have never run
Yeah.
a marathon in my life. So like, I can barely run a mile, but
No, I completely agree with that. And I think the greatest shame is when people do not make active and intentional decisions, where they're just acting in line with what society tells them or what is expected of them. And so they spend a certain way or they look a certain way. And then they wake up one day and then they're like, what did I do? Because they hadn't actually been thinking about any choice that they made. And that's exactly what I tell people too. Do what you want. If you don't want to be a nomad, you don't have to be a nomad. If you don't wanna, like, I'm not preaching anything in any kind of way that says you have to do this. The only thing I'm preaching is be true to yourself and make active decisions in your life. And, the rest, the fulfillment will come when you do that. And I had looked at my life and said, I'm not fulfilled by this house full of things, by, you know, the American dream, the two-car garage, the yard, the traditional signs of success, the corporate title and all of that. I'm like, I'm homeless and I'm jobless, so to speak, now. And where, anybody could look down at me and say, oh, she's failed the game. I actually feel like, hey, guess what? I have ownership of my time. And that is the greatest status symbol.
absolutely. You're preaching to the choir. And that makes me wonder about your money background. Did you grow up with kind of that like American, white picket fence type of mindset? Did you have to break free of that or were you kind of set up to have this mindset from the get-go?
I mean, my family, like I lived in a family that I mean, my dad was paying the mortgage basically 40 years, He was buying a new car every 5 years or so, like everybody else, upgrading the car. They didn't invest because they were afraid of investing. So they only put it in a savings account and don't overdraw your checking account and, work your jobs and, save your money. That was sort of what my dad preached. Quitting was never, you never wanted to quit because you wanted to be an honorable person that worked really hard. And actually, all my jobs I got fired from basically when like I couldn't quit. So I just didn't show up. And then I got fired. And then I was like, well, it's not my fault.
Badge of honor. I like that. The badge of honor to be hired.
Yeah. And I don't know. Yeah. Money was pretty taboo. Like my parents didn't really talk much about it. I think most people consider money to be kind of taboo. I didn't really know how much my dad made or anything like that. But money was also kind of treated as a reward. I remember in high school, the most families give an allowance for doing your chores. I actually got paid for A's. So if I got a B, I got nothing. But if I got an A, I got $20. So in high school, that added up to if you had 7 classes per trimester, then that added up. I, worked hard for the reward. I don't know. I don't think that I really learned, and most people probably don't, in schools, from our families, from any kind of mainstream education, how to manage money or how to really maximize your money, because it basically goes as far as, don't spend more than you earn kind of thing. But credit is so easy to come by and it's so easy to just buy and not as easy to save. So I really had to figure out a lot of this out by myself.
Yeah, I think that's, like you said, pretty typical because our parents, I'm assuming yours were also in the boomer generation, given we're similar ages. Just, I mean, even to this day, my mom and I, we talk about money, but she still won't tell me what her salary was when she retired. She just won't tell me. And it's not that I push her on it, but she just refuses to tell me. And I don't, I'm like, what is that about? It's like impolite to talk about politics or money. And what's funny about that, politics and money shape our entire world. So I just find it so funny that we don't talk about this on a regular basis when it literally shapes everything. I mean, take a pothole on your street. That is politics and money because your elected officials are the reason why there's a pothole that hasn't been fixed. And then also, whatever money that you're paying in taxes is what fixes that pothole. And so it's like we have to talk about these things, y'all. How did you take some of these things that you learned or didn't learn as a young person into your adult life when it came to money? How were your philosophies shaped by what you learned from your parents or didn't learn from your parents?
I wrote a pretty popular blog a couple years ago. I think the title is like my worst financial mistake ever, saving money. And the point is, saving money is nice, but investing is much more powerful. And I never got any of those lessons. And I had to figure all that out by myself. And granted, I guess maybe still at 30, mid 30s, early 30s when I started, it's still kind of on the earlier side in the grand scheme of things, but not as early as it could have been had my parents sort of launched me off on that foot. So I think, great that a lot of families, hopefully, who are kind of getting this non-mainstream education are maybe setting up their kids for something a little bit better. But also to your point about kind of being secretive about money, I have been blogging now like 7, almost 8 years, and finance is a big part of that, or budgeting and how it all goes together. But it wasn't until a few months ago that I actually even publicly announced my net worth on my blog. And that was something I had been, like, kind of struggling and sitting on for a while because I just didn't know if I wanted anybody to know. Like, I was really, like, dancing around it. I would say, "Oh, draw your own conclusions," like, throwing things out there about my retirement vehicle accounts and, selling my house and how I had, this much in cash and this much and a chunk in brokerage, and so I had danced around it for so many years, but just recently kind of got the courage to reveal it. To that point, when I quit, it was about 500. I had about 500K, and my net worth is up, I think, between, like, 550 and 560 right now. That was a little bit revealing, but I feel like if we can be more transparent about salaries and about saving and spending, and some people will look at that and say that's nothing. Other people, especially in the countries that I'm going to, will say, "Oh my gosh, that is a fortune." And, you really have to think about yourself and your own spending habits, and don't be afraid also.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, I don't ask people who come on the podcast to share their numbers because, and it's not that I don't want them to talk about money, it's that the numbers are kind of irrelevant because they're going to be different for everybody. It's the concepts and the way you think about money and the fact that you're willing to talk about the philosophies around money and what that means. That's the part that we need to open up. I do think there is a good thing about talking about salaries, especially when it comes to like women and people of color, because they tend to get paid less. So when it comes to that field, I definitely think numbers are important because we need to reveal more of that. But otherwise, when it comes to knowing your net worth versus knowing my net worth, it's not really relevant because our journeys are different, right? And we have a tendency as humans to compare ourselves to other people. And so some people listening to this might be like, oh my God, I don't think I could ever get to $500,000 by the time I was 39. And whereas other people who are 39 are like, well, I have 4.5 million. So,
Yeah.
and so I don't want that. That's not necessary. And I think it's brave that you shared, but I also think it just gives people context about what you're living on. And I think that's a motivator because I'm like, wow, that's not much because everybody thinks you need millions of dollars to retire. And you're like, nope.
Yeah, and I think another key thing that I sort of emphasized in that is when I started, this was what I had. And I in that particular blog, and I don't have it like pulled up or in memory, but in 2013 I had this, and in 2015 I had this, and I showed basically that bell curve of compounding where all of a sudden you're doubling. And I think people think they look at that big number and say, there's no way I can get there. But you know what? In 2013, I had this. And you could look at that and say, oh, so that was me. Maybe in a couple of years, if I make some changes or, change my actions, I could have a little bit more. And I think that's what's motivating is seeing how circumstances can change when you really get spunky and get radical and make some of those kind of bizarre decisions that most other Americans would never make because we're just used to our conveniences and we're just used to our ways of life that make things easy for us, but everything comes with a premium.
Yeah, and that's where what you said about living intentionally and like really making those decisions that match with your values really matters because if you value getting DoorDash every day, I mean, really, like if you really
Mhm.
value that, you can work that in. You just have to, you can't value everything, right? You
Yeah.
can't, I mean, you could, but if you also value financial independence, then there's that sliding scale of priority, like how
Mhm.
high of a priority is financial independence versus getting DoorDash every day or leasing a car every few years or things like that. You can do those things. You just have to know that you're going to be giving up other things. And, nothing I'm saying is new. Anybody who's listened to Paula Pant's Afford Anything podcast knows that. But it's one of those things where sometimes people will just throw up their hands and be like, "Well, I'm never gonna make that." And so then they even spend more. But
Yeah.
you're right. I even surprised myself with where I got to. So I'm at a quarter million for my net worth, but in 2018, I was negative $80,000 net worth. Look at that jump, and that was
Mhm.
only 6 years ago. I can say that I think I might have had a 50% savings rate for maybe 6 months out of that entire time. The rest of the time, it was between 15 and 30. So, like, you don't have to save 50% either for that compounding. Now, granted, we are in a very, like, rigorous bull market still, even with COVID and down year of 2022, but, it just keeps going up and up, so that helps. It's amazing, and like you said, watching that progress if you really check in with that progress, maybe not every day, maybe not even every month, but like every quarter, and you see that positive, that number get more and more positive, it's going to be so awesome to see that over time.
Yeah. And people do not underestimate the power of radical change. There are so many people like, "Oh, let me skip the Starbucks or the avocado toast," or whatever meme is going around now. But what if you, like, took the bus instead of driving? Like, stuff that some people wouldn't even consider? There are those opportunities if we really kinda get spunky and also realize, like, nothing lasts forever. Give something up for 3 months, like, how about you stop drinking alcohol? There's so many ways to save a significant amount of money, but it's some things that people just won't even consider. And I encourage everyone to think about what could that be and just try it for 2 months. And then maybe you start seeing the gains and the savings and the compounding and you're like, "Okay, what is that worth to me?" What is more attractive? Is it, the freedom of the open road and the car commercials of, like, how independent I feel? Do I really feel that independent, or is this money making me feel independent. Like, where am I getting my independence from? And, fill in the blank. There's a bunch of different things you could throw in there.
Yeah, absolutely. I like the don't drink for 3 months because that's easy. That's an easy thing to do. And you're probably spending more on it than you think. And even if you did that for 3 months and you're like, well, I don't want to stop drinking forever, you could be like, now that I know how much I'm spending on this, maybe I can just drink, once a month or once a week, or maybe I can have, gatherings at my house instead of at the bar or the club. Not that I've been to a club in a long time, but whatever you do. I just remember when I was in my early 20s, like, I think I spent the most on clothes and eating out and bars. You mentioned looking in your closet and being like, what the I
Yeah.
literally had that moment. I had that moment when I think I was like 25, 26, something like that, where I was piling clothes on my bed and I was going to donate them because I needed to free up space in my tiny little New York closet, and half of them had the tags on it. And I was like, why did I even buy this? And it was just like cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. And that was when I just got my together when it came to finances. Now, I hadn't found the FI movement quite at that point. I was just doing the basics, but it's what started it all. So it was such a small thing, but it did. So
Yeah.
you guys just have to find your small thing. Yeah.
I love that. When I was going through my closet and having that realization, it was because I was doing a garage sale to get rid of everything in my house so that I could be downsized into my car and drive off into the sunset. And I was moving stuff from my bedroom closet into the garage, and it was just like, oh my God, the sheer volume. And then when you do the math and you're like, okay, so this is how much it costs. And then when you have and you sell anything, which most of it's not sold, but it's like dollars, it's pennies on the dollar. And I'm like, this is really eye opening because you never get what you pay for, not even close. What did that even do for me? I probably wore some of these things I wore a couple times. What was I thinking? Because that's money that could have gone towards my freedom, you know? It could have been free months earlier, maybe years earlier. It's like when you look at it with that lens, it's just overwhelmingly kind of sad and slap in the face, like, wake up, change something.
Yeah. I don't think I've been on a clothing shopping spree since that moment, which was 11 years ago. I've bought clothes, just out of mainly necessity. I'm definitely not as thin as I was when I was 25. But what I used to do in New York was I was bored or sad or whatever. And so I'd go shopping. It's New York, like you could
Yeah.
go down Fifth Avenue or whatever, Broadway, and go in all the shops. And I would walk away with $1,000 in clothes in just a day. And I was making like $25,000 a year. And so I put it all on the credit card and just paid the minimums. It's terrible.
Mhm.
I haven't done that since. I think I spend maybe $100 here or there on some clothes sometimes
Yeah.
if I need them. So,
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I spend less than $100 every couple months on clothes. My clothes budget is so small. I remember when I had like, oh, I could spend 400 or 500 bucks a month on shopping, and now it's maybe I even spend that in a year just to like refresh my wardrobe and stuff from clothing wearing out because I only really wear the stuff that fits in my suitcase. So it gets a lot of wear and I have to refresh it. But yeah, the American way is we just spend what our paycheck gives us. We spend what we have capacity for instead of saving first or investing first. We think, hey, I got to keep up with the Benjamins. Is it the Benjamins or the Joneses? Whatever. You know,
the
Y-
Joneses. Yeah.
I'm like
Speaking
wrong,
of the Benjamins.
wrong metaphor. But you just that's what you do. And the same thing with the car. Oh, it's a couple years old, better get a new car. We have just been programmed. So you have to really actively get out of it, make a decision, make an intentional decision, make choices that align with your values so you can the lifestyle you want to have.
Yeah, for sure. And, I want to also say have compassion for yourself if you're not perfect at doing this right away because society conditioned you out of doing
Mhm.
it this way. So you're going to have some hiccups and it's okay. It's okay if you screw up. Just course correct and you'll be fine. As long as you just have that in your mind, if financial independence and financial freedom and not being tied to your corporate job is one of your desires in life, you will course correct and you will be able to do this. Just, it takes some time. So I just want to say that to everybody, just in case, like, I just have this tendency of being really hard on myself. And
Yeah.
so I'm kind of talking to myself, like, I need a mirror right now. Because, I try so hard to emulate people like Mr. Money Mustache, who just thinks people who eat out for pizza are crazy. And I'm just like, but this little local pizzeria that's down the street from me, who I know the owners, I want to give them my business,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well-being also is a factor. You can't just like skimp and Scrooge yourself into not having any fun. It's just about, again, making those choices. So, you asked about what did your parents teach you? My parents taught me, okay, you can pick one treat. You can't have all the treats in the bakery counter, but you can have one treat. So as a kid, you're poring over it and you're like, what is my treat going to be? I want to make the right choice. It doesn't mean don't treat yourself. It means just pick the treat that is really going to taste the best for you. I choose to prioritize, I don't shop, but I prioritize amazing travel experiences. That is where I'm like, sunrise, hot air balloon over the Serengeti, $500. Rather do that than $500 worth of clothes. So it's about making choices. And, probably the theme of this episode is the choices that align with your values, and make sure you're going to make the choices. Some other person might be like, that's a lot of money to spend on A, B, C, D. But if it's something that is going to fulfill you and bring you the joy and the well-being that we're after in this life, go for it.
Thanks for listening to the EverydayFI podcast. If you're loving the show, here are some things you can do. Number 1, subscribe in your favorite podcast player and share the show with your friends and family. Number 2, please leave a review. I'm always looking for ways to improve the show. Number 3, check out my website, EverydayFI.com, where you can listen to all the episodes and leave comments for myself and the guest. Number 4, if you're interested in sharing your own financial independence story, you can find a submission form at everyday-fi.com/podcast. And finally, number 5, join my Patreon membership for only $5 a month at patreon.com/everydayfi-podcast. This is a one-woman show, so every little bit counts. See you next time as we continue to go down the path to financial freedom.